Alex, I didn't watch any of the Dota stuff.
Neither did I. So
Great.
I guess you and I are one in our complete ignorance of anything that has happened at the International this weekend.
Yeah, I have. Twitter was nonsense to me for great stretches of time, but people seem really excited and they seemed into it, and I'm not going to disparage them for being excited, I guess.
All I was able to divine from what little I did try to watch and what little I gathered from Twitter was that at one point two Chinese teams played each other, and that was pretty exciting. There was one announcer who insisted on dressing in the most outlandish and vaguely Riddler-esque outfits that I've ever seen.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And well, I don't know. It's just like there was one time I turned it on. This dude was basically wearing like a Mondrian painting as a jacket. It was kind of unsettling. And big plays were made. I don't know. Do you even know who's in the final today?
People who play Dota.
Okay, that seems reasonable. Sure.
No,
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it today though. That's like if you're gonna watch any day, I guess the finals is probably the day to watch. So I will be tuning in. I've heard the ESPN stuff is not that great from the folks that have tuned into ESPN. Was it 2 or 3? I can't remember which one we. I don't know.
Let's just say 3.
Yeah,
That sounds right.
non-ESPN. And it sounds like they're running into the same problems that you would imagine you would run into with commentary for something like this, is just trying to figure out what the tone is for entry-level viewers, and then just having a real difficult time achieving that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's tough. You know, you have to know where to draw that line between we are explaining this to you like you are a baby who doesn't know anything, and we are trying to be semi-smart about it, and that's a tough line to draw, especially the first. I mean, I guess this is the first year they've had like this beginner sort of commentary.
Well, at the beginning, I think the commentary that's happening on that Twitch stream, I think, is different than what's happening on ESPN.
On the sure, yes.
But yes, like I think more generally speaking, this is a big year for trying to figure out how do you communicate extremely fast-paced games with very nuanced mechanics that is being played at a high level to an audience that is maybe just interested because their friend is really into it.
Yeah. And I think we all have a friend at this point who is really into it, so there is, still in me a little bit of desire to try and understand what the hell he's talking about half the time. But what I watched, I was still not able to glean any useful information out of. Now, I don't know if that's because the newcomer commentary just isn't dumbed down enough for my feeble rat brain, or if it's because they're just not very good at delivering that information yet. I don't know.
I don't know. I think
I just switched over to the mainstream and just like said I'm going to be confused by all of this. I'm still going to try and watch it for half an hour and just see if I can pick up anything, and I really didn't.
I mean, it's also a time investment thing, right? Like if you look at Dota as though you never had seen a soccer or football game before, and then just started watching one, it would seem like a lot of nonsense too. I mean, that's part of the issue with just jumping into Dota or to any game if you were to be watching it on a high level, is you have to get over a certain hump where you have enough base knowledge of what's going on to even appreciate what's being commented on. And what's more difficult about Dota is that unlike a sport that's being played sort of in front of you in real life, it's very difficult to appreciate. There isn't an athletic component necessarily. Like a lot of what's happening in video games at a high level, there's obviously reflex but there's a lot of mental skill that is involved, right? Like there's a lot of head games that are being played. Like a lot of what's occurring is not happening on screen in the video game. It's reflected on screen, but it's happening in the player's brain, and they're executing that, as opposed to if you're to watch a tennis match, which I don't watch tennis, but you can very easily see, oh wow, like this person is very athletic. I can understand, why you may not understand the nuance of why they're good, but on display, just in the human form, you have a sense of what makes them able to be in the place that they're in, competing at this level, which just is not true in a game like Dota or just a video game, more generally speaking. And that just means that you have to then really understand the mechanics of the game, which takes a long time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like you, I will probably watch the final stuff today because, I mean, why not? I might as well. Even if I understand none of it, I might as well observe it.
Wait, so okay, Beach Thunder in the chat says, so it's like poker. I was like, yes, that would be watching Dota, at least in terms of what you can surmise from just looking at what's happening. It is not dissimilar to poker in that regard, because...
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I played a lot of poker, and granted, I understand that there are certain things that if you don't know how poker works or how strategies or any of that kind of stuff work, you could be confused by it. But I think the basic... I don't know, man. Like, I was able to sort of just immerse... Like, when I wanted to learn poker, I was able to just kind of immerse myself in it for a little bit, and then I felt like I got a pretty good base on it. I've tried to immerse myself in Dota like 2 or 3 times over the years, and every time I do it, I just come away more confused, which I don't think that's what they intend. I don't think that's the way that's supposed to work. I'm sorry. It's just not for me. But I will watch the final. I will sit there. I will cheer when someone wins. I don't care who. I have no investment in any of this. I will probably, and maybe one day it'll all click for me. Hasn't happened yet.
Someone in the chat just linked me to an image file that someone collected of random people tuning into ESPN2 and realizing that Dota was on there. This commentary, mildly offensive. Not just, also very dismissive. I guess I can't really blame any of these people for reacting this way. Let's see. ESPN2 showing a video game competition, calling it a sport, and we've lost all definitions of the word. That response does not surprise me in the slightest. I would say that even people that like video games have that conversation, let alone outsiders that don't have a lot of interest to begin with.
Let's break that commentary down for a second, though, because think about this. We're in the period of time when there are almost no sports outside of professional baseball, arena football, and Major League Soccer right now going in the U.S. I think cricket is going on somewhere in the world, too, but fucking who cares? These are people who are willfully tuning in to ESPN2 during the driest season of all sports and getting huffy when they are showing a video game tournament on ESPN2 during a weekend when they could be out doing anything. They're just tuning in to ESPN2 during this period of time and taking umbrage with the fact that they are showing something that is not really a sport because there are no fucking sports going on right now.
Yep, you're right.
I'm not saying it's not weird that ESPN is covering Dota. That is a little weird and unexpected. Think about the context, people. That's all I'm asking.
I think esports also must be generally confusing to an outside viewer.
Sure.
Because I think esports is a bad term to begin with. It seems like we're starting to settle. It seems like maybe esports is the term that we're going to end up using, but I think if you were to say high-level video game play versus like esports, I think you would get very different reactions from people. They may not respect it. They may not be interested. They may still be dismissive. But I think the term esports sounds like it was generated in a marketing factory out of ooze, as opposed to I don't know what else. I hate naming things, so I'm like the worst person to sit here and necessarily get all high and mighty about what you should call it instead. But I really dislike the term esports, and I think it allows people to be fairly dismissive up front just because it sounds like a really, crass marketing term.
It does, and it always has, and it always will, but it's there. We're not going to get rid of it anytime soon, so at a certain point we kind of have to just sort of embrace it. Thorny and poisonous as it is, we are going to have to give it a big hug at some point and just be like, all right, fine, you're with us now. We hate you. You're fucking awful, but whatever. We're going to make you our own. It is what it is. People in the chat are pointing out that Tour de France is also going on. You are correct. I believe they are airing that on actual network television and not the other ESPNs. So sorry, if people actually wanted to watch the Tour de France, I think you can do that elsewhere, just not on ESPN3.
Osmiles in the chat says cyber games. See, that's cooler. Cyber games sound. If it was the
Cyber
80s,
games sounds like much more of a product of like a dystopia, like a futuristic dystopia where everyone in the cyber games ends up dead except the winner. But that's okay because that still sounds cooler.
Yeah, if it was the 80s, we could get away with cyber sports. Unfortunately, it's 2014.
If it was the 80s, we could get away with a lot of things we can't get away with anymore.
Yeah.
In some respects, that's probably for the best. In others, maybe a little disappointing. We'll see.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think we're stuck with esports, but maybe in the same way that we're stuck with video game, right? Like that. There are weird terms that are either put upon things to describe them, or just become part of the lexicon out of serendipity. Like video game is a weird term that doesn't really necessarily describe all of what video games are, and yet we're sort of, what are we going to do? Not call them video games? And
video game is only a weird term when you make it one word. It's fine when it's two words. It's normal.
See, yeah. As long as we can agree on that. I don't think I've ever worked for an outlet that made me spell it with one word.
I've been at some point at GameSpot, someone brought it up that maybe it should be one word, and I think that person was shouted down very quickly.
It just always seems like, not to get too far in the weeds
Let's
here,
do it.
but that the people who want to change it from video games as two words to video games as one word are trying to reject this term that was put upon video games because they were descriptive, right? Like this is games played on a video screen. Yes. Whereas video games as one word, somehow as one word seems like we're taking ownership of that phrase and making it something new. I just think it's overthinking it. People call them video games. They spell it with two words. There are much more interesting things to fight about.
They are video games, not video games. It's not one word. I'm sorry. There's no context under whether I will ever accept that. And if you try, I will burn myself in the street, self-immolation style, in protest. That is not the world that I want to live in.
Apparently, it's Giant Bomb's birthday too.
Oh wow! Happy birthday, Giant Bomb. Wonder if you're like 6 years old at this point.
6 years.
Damn.
That's old. It's not a new website anymore.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. When did I guess I've been here for the last 4, haven't I?
Yeah. Well, I guess yeah. If you bundles, yeah. I guess you include like whiskey and screened in that.
Yeah.
Before, and then I'm three in a couple of months. 3 in a couple of months.
Yeah, sounds about right. I think you came in not long after I started at Screen, so.
Yeah, I started in March. March sounds right. So sure. Yeah, wow, 6 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Man.
Happy birthday, site.
Way to go, video games and Giant Bomb.
Patrick, how was your weekend? What did you do? Did you end up playing any video games?
Man. So I intended to play the Destiny beta at some point. I did say I would play with you on Sunday. Did you play it on Sunday?
So yeah, I ended up playing a bunch of Destiny over the weekend. That was pretty much all I played this weekend.
All right, let's start there, and then we'll get to what I did, because I didn't play Destiny because I spent the whole weekend playing Divinity Original Sin, which I now understand and now can explain in terms that will make it sound complimentary and why it's a game worth playing. But so I played the alpha. Mm-hmm. And really, really enjoyed it. And I ended up not feeling guilty about passing on the beta. I mean, it's still going on, right? So I guess I could still be playing it if I wanted to.
Yeah, it's still going on for the foreseeable future, though. I hit the current level cap, which is level 8, which admittedly is not that high. But I probably put in a solid, I'm going to say like 4 or 5 hours into it. Right,
and I guess then I looked on Twitter and people were telling me that the beta is just the alpha with like an extra mission or 2. So it seems like they're mostly doing a stress test of the game and the servers, and so I feel like I've more or less seen what that has to offer, even if I never get around to it. But so what do you make of it? Did you have the same response that I did of I don't really get Destiny, but now I get Destiny, and now I'm really excited for it?
So I didn't. I'm with you on the first half of that part. I didn't get Destiny before. I get it a lot better now. I can't say that I'm super excited for it, but I do have much more interest in it now that it has kind of clicked for me. Everyone has, explained in fairly thorough detail. It's like Bungie just went and made an MMO using some of the kind of look and feel stuff that Bungie is known for. It is most certainly that. The best thing I will say about it is that as a game in which you shoot stuff, the shooting is actually very satisfying. I like the variety of weapons I've collected so far. The combat mechanics all seem really good. And the online stuff, like when you are kind of put into a position where you need to team up with people and work as a group, like it can be really fun, actually. I ended up spending a lot of it on just kind of playing on my own because that's kind of how I tend to play most games. I am antisocial by nature. And I have to say that as a solo game, which admittedly I don't think this is the way Destiny is intended to be played in most situations, and I accept that, it is not nearly as thrilling. I did not enjoy going through those opening missions nearly as much by myself as I did with people. Which isn't to say that it's impossible or anything. Like, it's not overly difficult. I just didn't get the same sense of satisfaction out of it playing by myself as I did when I was like bunched up into one of those fire team scenarios where you're, forcibly made to play with people. That ended up being a lot more fun. So that is a game that I'm going to have to play with my friends, what few I have, if I'm going to play it in the real world. I don't think I'm going to be able to deal with that one on my own. Also, I'm going to say that I tried out some of the competitive multiplayer stuff, too. Like, there's a whole other planet section you can go to where you can go and you can just test your might against other Guardians. And I did not enjoy that very much at all. And granted, I was very bad at it, and I was mostly a liability to the team I was on. But even apart from that, I just didn't get much out of it. Like, it just didn't seem that much fun. And I don't know if that's just me or if it's the mode itself, but something about the competitive multiplayer stuff just didn't jive with the mechanics as well as the co-op stuff did. And I can't quite articulate what it is that wasn't working for me. I mean, I'm bad at lots of first-person shooters, and I still have fun with them, but this one just wasn't clicking for me in a competitive light.
It's the Crucible, right? I think that's what...
That's it. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I didn't mess with that stuff at all. Even when I end up playing Destiny in September, I sincerely doubt, unless there are sort of motivations to collect loot for some reason, then I can't imagine I'll be spending much time in the competitive multiplayer. It's just not where I have a lot of interest. But you're definitely right about the experience of playing Destiny solo versus with other people. I think the confusion was whether, Vinny and I talked about this a lot, was whether you could play Destiny on your own, and you totally can. It's going to be a game you can, finish start to end solo. But like you mentioned, it's probably not, it's getting into this, this weird term, the way it's meant to be played. But it really does seem like a game that is meant to be played, or you're going to have more fun, or you're going to see the game in its full potential, with multiple people. And I think part of that is because these sections that you're going in, at least in the kind of like open spaces that are in the alpha and the beta, there's not as much going on in terms of like scripting and things like that. They're open spaces to accommodate the fact that there are going to be, up to 4 people, in addition to you running into whole groups of other folks that could have up to 4 people. So by necessity, there is less happening on a sort of beat-to-beat basis, and you don't notice that as much when you have 3 other people with you, because you have 3 other guys running around shooting and jumping and getting into all sorts of nonsense. But the moment that you subtract that and it's just you, the worlds feel kind of empty.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's that MMO design where it's like at least all the missions in the beta just revolve around you going through these same environments and taking on, these kind of waves or pockets of enemies and, either killing them for loot or just trying to progress through them to get to the objective, which mostly just revolve around make your little robot guy do something and then defend this position while, waves of enemies try to come at him. it's not nearly as exciting without people. And granted, the only reason I got involved with people during the beta this weekend was because the last mission that you can play is this fire team one where they actually forcibly make you a 3-man team.
Mm.
And so otherwise, I had not really tried any of that stuff because no one I knew was actually online at the times I was playing.
So it's matchmaking. Like they tell you, hey, you cannot do this unless you either come with a crowd or get thrown into one. Okay.
Here are some similarly leveled guardians that we're just going to match you up with, and you're going to do this. And then when they drop out of the match, haha, we don't actually kick you out of this game, so you have to play it by yourself now until you quit out. So haha, fuck you. That happened a couple of times, but once I got through it, it was actually pretty good. So yeah, I appreciate that there are parts of that game where they're like, look, you have to do this with people, so just do it. And they made it relatively easy to do that, and I appreciate that. That said, two things kind of drove me up the wall playing it, both solo and with people. One, I'm still waiting for that game's personality to kind of come out a little bit more. Like, the backstory and the lore stuff seems kind of interesting, but you get almost none of it from what they're showing in that section of the game. I assume there's obviously a lot more to come, and there's a lot more to open up, and that's fine. I just, other than, like, kind of a cool class system, I ended up rolling a Warlock, and I ended up enjoying that class a lot, and some pretty good shooting. I don't really know that there's a great deal of personality in that beta, and I'm hopeful that there's more in there. The other thing is that all the comments about Peter Dinklage's voice acting I thought were kind of over-exaggerated when I saw a few clips of the alpha or whatever, and then sitting there listening to him do that dialogue in that game, even with the vocal effects on, my God, that guy could not have possibly cared any less about the dialogue he was reading. It is some of the lousiest celebrity voice acting I have heard in the game in quite a while. And I understand that he's playing a robot, so maybe he's not supposed to be the most emotional character. I think that in and of itself is maybe kind of a misstep, because if you're going to give your character this character who is going to be around all the time talking to you, maybe give him some kind of personality to speak of, because holy shit, it literally just sounds like Peter Dinklage dead reading lines off of paper and then being like, can I go now, at the end of every line. It's horrible.
Here's what I think is the misstep on Bungie's part, is that they got someone like Peter Dinklage at all. I think a robot, that kind of companion, would be much better served by an actor who, you know, you wouldn't be able to recognize who he was. Like, Peter Dinklage is so distinctive, and right now our conception of him is so very narrow, as he has become, you know, extraordinarily popular, riding on the success of Game of Thrones and the exceptional acting, you know, he does in that show. But like, God, I don't think it's possible to listen to that and not think all the time Peter Dinklage, right? Yeah. Whereas if it was just some very talented, completely anonymous voice actor, then they could just be the robot. They could be that character. But I have a hard time listening to that and not just thinking Bungie had a budget, they decided to go after Peter Dinklage, as opposed to they got, you know, the best voice actor for the role.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing about, like, there's no character there. I understand he's your robot helper, and so he's maybe not a person with emotions, but at the same time, why would you have all the story stuff, like, narrated? Why would you want all the story stuff narrated to you by a character with no discernible personality? Like, it's just really weird and kind of unsettling in a way. Like, it's a little off-putting, and I just don't enjoy it at all, and it's really disappointing, because I love Peter Dinklage as an actor. It's just either he didn't care or they just didn't give him any direction or something, but it's bad. So those are my gripes with the beta as it exists right now. I will say I did have fun with it. I think that, you know, once you kind of understand that it is very much an MMO and that the missions are built out that way, I think it's it seems like it's going to be a really well-made one of those. I just hope that there's a little bit more to it than what they're showing, because while the classes all seem cool and the shooting all seems cool, it all feels a little bit empty, and not just in there's not a lot to do, but in just it doesn't feel like it has a whole lot of soul to it, and I really hope there is somewhere in there a little more soul than what they're showing.
Yeah, I think that does not come across in the beta or the alpha at all. It very much feels like you're just playing slices from a game, which it is. That's they're very clearly doing server stress testing and balance issues and all the stuff that is supposed to actually happen in this stuff, even if they are stretching the definition of alphas and betas, because you don't go from alpha to beta in a couple of weeks. But putting aside the way video games have ruined that technical terminology, this is a little bit different than just driving pre-orders. It's also doing that, is definitely also serving that, because if you pre-order, you get a code to play the game early in these stages. But you're absolutely right that for the kind of person that is thinking, man, I really like single-player Bungie and the combat and all that stuff that goes into making those campaigns so memorable, that does not come across in the beta or the alpha at all. I think what the beta and alpha do is give you a better idea of what Destiny actually is, potentially, and what Bungie has been talking about, that they have not conveyed particularly well in presentation format up until this point. But I don't think it necessarily addresses the concern. And again, they're targeting, it's possible, completely fine, if they're targeting a different audience. But the people like myself, and it seems like you're a little in that audience as well, of, man, I really wanted a brand new shooter world from the creators of Halo, with all the the production values that go associated with that, and I may not be getting that game exactly, but it also may be there, right? Like it might also be there, and the missions they've plucked do not reflect that at all. Because you have to imagine the way the game opens is probably going to be fairly traditional. Oftentimes you'll get, correct me if I'm wrong, but other folks that have described, like MMOs to me, like often you'll have, the opening hours are you by yourself, and they're more cinematic, and they're their way of getting you into that world before everything kind of opens up. And it wouldn't surprise me if Destiny played very traditional, like a brand new Halo type game, at least insofar as the campaign experience goes, before you even get close to touching sort of the multiplayer stuff that's underneath.
Yeah, here's hoping, because again, there's on the surface level, there's some very cool stuff there, and there's some stuff very much worth getting excited about. I just need a little more meat underneath that surface to really feel like this is a game I will want to play, kind of, if not through to its conclusion, then at least sink a whole bunch of hours into. I was willing to take myself to the level cap with the beta this weekend. That ended up really being the only game I played pretty much the entire weekend, as I was out of the apartment a fair amount. But that said, I enjoyed the time I had with it. I was just hoping for maybe a little bit more, and maybe it's just not there in that beta form. Like, that's fine, but there are reasons for me to at least be concerned with how that final game is going to turn out.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a whole group of people that embrace it in a Borderlands type fashion, and it takes off and does really well, and then folks like you and me are left in the dust to play other games that accomplish similar things. But I'm still curious. They've got me interested enough that I'm definitely going to play the final product. I'm just, I think like you, remain a little bit concerned about where that falls into what I want versus what we're actually getting, which isn't even necessarily a bad thing. Bungie can, make whatever they want, but especially along the way, as it's been confusing to parse what exactly this game is and isn't, those concerns are not necessarily fully taken care of from what we've played so far.
Sure. So what did you end up playing this weekend? As you sip your coffee and I stretch while you swallow the liquid that has gone into your mouth.
So I played a lot of Divinity Original Sin, which I mentioned on Friday in a capacity that was, I feel overwhelmed, and a lot of the systems in the game aren't explained super well. Just diving into it without the relying a little bit on wikis and guides that players have written up to explain. Hey, here's kind of the way you should play the opening hours. So I got to avoid something what has happened to a lot of people, which is playing about 5 hours, realizing you spec your characters completely inappropriately, and then having to start over from there. Which, not the worst thing in the world, but you and I tend to play a lot of games, so the idea of wasting 5 hours is terrifying to me, because that could have been spent playing something else. So I just sort of followed Kirk Hamilton of Kotaku's guide for kind of the characters that I sort of started out with, and then stuck to what he recommended, and it's worked out just fine. And now I'm level 8 in the game, and if I've made it this far without much trouble, then I can probably get through the rest of the game with my current situation. But so there are moments in games, and I think I might write about this for a story today, because I've had it happen in a couple of games now, where you put in the time just sort of waiting for it all to click one way or the other. You can understand a game and then end up disliking it, but often the moment you're hoping for is you wait for it to click and then you completely fall in love with it. And the moment I fell in love with Divinity, I'm really going to be careful here, because I'm pretty sure I might just say Destiny now that we've talked about Destiny right before this. So this game is all about tactical superiority in combat. This is a combat-heavy game. There's a story and RPG stuff, blah 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 blah. But like, it is really, that stuff is just there to serve as in between the combat sections. And the combat stuff is terrific, because once you realize that this game is all about modifying terrain, and what I mean by that is that the magic characters you have can fall into a number of different elemental categories. I primarily have I have one wizard that is into earth and fire, because those complement one another, and I'll get to that in a second. And then I have another one that is into ice and air, because those also complement one another. Now, the reason they complement one another is so my goddamn amazing fire wizard is the character that opens up when the turns begin, and she has this oil ability that you kind of sprinkle along the map. And so I'm sprinkling oil across the map, and then use one of her fire spells, and then you ignite that oil. And so what you're doing in the game is, yes, you're like casting spells and getting your barbarians up and whacking dudes, but a lot of what you're doing is like, I will spend a lot of time just creating this barrier of oil. I light it on fire, and then the only thing these enemies can do is come at me and walk through this fire, and then just slowly kill themselves as they make their way towards me. While at the same time, you're using the ice and air wizard to create puddles of water that then you are electrifying. So it's a lot of this sort of modification of the world around you that really makes the game unique and interesting. And once I had this scorched hellscape in front of me that turned a battle I had played 6 times to no avail, and then suddenly I realized, oh, if I just light the world on fire, they all just walk through this and die. And then had no trouble. Like, I barely even got hit. That's like how much the battle flipped in my favor. And man, it was a terrific goddamn moment.
I saw you tweet a screenshot of that with, I don't know, it was Burn With Me or something, just the picture of the scorched earth, and I just imagine you sitting there cackling with glee as just fire surrounded you, and it was a fun little mental image I had. But yeah, that sounds pretty cool, and it sounds like that game has finally clicked for you in a way in which that will probably carry you through. I don't know how long that game is, but I imagine you are now invested enough to where you're going to try and finish it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I probably played 10 hours over the weekend spread across Saturday and Sunday, and I wish the story stuff was better. Nothing about what's happening in the world, or the characters, or the dialogue, which there is a lot of, is particularly grabbing me. Maybe that will sort of come into its own, but the combat stuff alone is worth playing the game. Like, even if the story stuff is just window dressing to get you to different combat scenarios, that's fine with me. And what I love about it is I can't sometimes tell if I'm breaking the game or I'm just discovering new things I can do. Like, for example, there are tons of different ways that you can play the game. You can not have wizards at all, and it's completely valid to play that way. I can't imagine how you would do that, but I also haven't spent the time to learn that. But you can sneak around, and you could have a whole set of thieves that are all about backstabbing, and you could just get up behind guys and really take them out or do massive damage before they even have a chance to realize you're there, which then initiates the turn-based combat. But this this great tactic I now have is I will sneak up to a group of enemies that I have found, and then I will bring out my my mage, and she's now recently acquired this meteor spell. That's this sort of range area of attack fireball spell that can take out. It's like within 4 meters, and so if you've got a cluster of guys, you can just rain hellfire down on them, and you can initiate a bunch of damage and a burning status, which is what, like, equivalent to poison but with fire, and will slowly take them out. And you'll have created a scorched earth and modified the terrain before the turns even begin, and you still get to go first. So,
ooh.
So it's this really satisfying moment where, like, I'll come up to a group of orcs and they don't see me quite yet, and I throw this meteor. 4 of them are now on fire, and then I've turned over the first turn to my guy on fire who can cast fire spells, and she is just creating a terrain of fire where the only way for them to get to me is through the fire. And even if they somehow avoid that, don't worry, I have my water mage coming up next, who will cast water on the ground, throw lightning at the ground, which then stuns them, and then the cycle just continues anew. And all that stuff is really, really fun, and it feels like I'm skirting the edge of what the game intends for you to do, and then what you're actually able to do. But it's really fun to experiment in that process. And the game has a whole co-op angle to it that I haven't messed with, but it's easy to imagine how all that stuff would be really fun too. But I'm tremendously enjoying it now, and it definitely comes highly recommended.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of these days I will actually finally sit down and try to play that game, I'm sure. And I think I will take your advice, and I will follow Kirk's advice on how to spec some of the whatever character I end up making, because I can tell that's the kind of game where I could probably get myself just a little too deep down the wrong pathway and then immediately go, well, I guess I'm just not going to play this anymore, and feel sad about it. But that's how that tends to happen for me a lot of times with these sorts of games.
Well, it was for me. This is a game where you can. So when I'm used to playing RPGs, I'm used to playing games in which there's a set, like the characters have been created by the designers. So like when you meet a character and they join your party, they're a rogue or they're a mage, right? Like there are sort of set roles for them, stats, increase on their own in a sort of predetermined fashion, and you and the player are largely just figuring out the tactics that you want to employ in combat based on the tools that have been provided to you by the designers at that point in the story. As opposed to Divinity and games of its ilk, which take a very different sort of setup, which is that the player can largely determine the characters and the style of play. And that's new to me. And so the hump for me, and the reason I found the guides really useful, was I had people that had already played the game that said, look, if you're not sure what you want and you don't want to waste 5 hours investing in a set of characters that you end up realizing isn't working for you, here's what has worked for me, here's what's been useful, and then go from there. And I'm still having a great amount of fun picking sort of my talents and where I go from there, and going down the skill tree on my own and figuring out what magic I'm assigning and what skills I'm assigning. But like the very base level, coming up with the characters and who they should be is taken care of for me, which just gets a lot of the burden off my back, and the feeling that I'm going to screw up. So I don't feel that way anymore, and I can focus on what for me is the most satisfying part of the game, which is the combat.
Right. Well, hopefully I'll get a chance to dig into that a little bit this week, though I do have actually a decent number of other things on my plate. The new episode of The Walking Dead is out this week.
Right. I heard the ending is out there already, so be careful.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try and play it today, so hopefully that will stop me from having to deal with any potential spoilers. So hopefully look for a recap of that this week. But yeah, there's for a period when there's really nothing coming out, there's actually some stuff popping up around here and there, and Vinny is adamant about making sure that we quick look as much as we can during this period. So, oh boy.
Yeah, there's, I thought this summer was going to be a summer where I'd sort of started attacking my backlog. I'd specifically have wanted to play Demon Souls and Valkyria Chronicles and Persona 4 the Golden, and it's looking highly unlikely at this point. I mean, Divinity is probably going to carry me for at least 2 weeks. Like,
Some
I have
daily
to
Divinity, maybe going to happen at some point.
I might be able to. I was trying to convince Vinny to play co-op with me, but now I'm so far ahead of him in level that I'm not sure if that will work. But maybe I'll do a Divinity stream at some point, just sort of to check in with that game. I'm hoping Brad's really into it too, so I'm hoping he'll continue along the Divinity path.
I bet you can get Rory in on it too.
Yeah, that's that's probably fair. And yeah, so I don't think I'm gonna get to any of those games. At least so Bloodborne is rumored to come out early next year, so I can play that. Like, I'll probably play that like Dark Souls, and I'll just play it just before Bloodborne comes out. And then Persona 5 will probably not come out here till sometime way into next year, so I still have time on that. But yeah, I don't know. What game in your backlog were you hoping to tackle if there was a mysterious summer in which there was nothing to play?
Oh, geez, well, this is not necessarily that example, but I had been wanting to at least play some Watch Dogs just so I could kind of be a little bit more informed about that game for myself, but I still have not touched a single minute of it, and I don't know that I'm going to get to it anytime soon.
Don't play it. Don't play it.
Yeah, I know. I just want to play a little bit of it just so I can say, hey, I played some of it and I now understand what this game is. And
if you play 5 hours, then just stop.
Yeah.
Then you'll have a grasp of what Watch Dogs is. It doesn't get any better or change very much in the 20 hours that you'll invest in after that to see it through. You'll just end up in the dark place that I was, and that forced me to write that story about how I fucking hate Aiden Pierce.
Yeah, I did download Revengeance when that was floating around in the Steam sales earlier this summer, and I have not touched that really at all yet. So I probably need to dig into that at some point because after hearing everyone rave about how weird that game is, I feel like I need to. But I don't know when I'm going to get to do that now.
That game is so good. It's legitimately a really fun character action game, and the last boss is just so good. I
remember the conversation about the last boss, and that was what got it onto my radar finally, because I was just, me, I don't care that much about Metal Gear anything, especially the weird Metal Gear stuff. And while I love Platinum, that for some reason still was not enough. And then hearing everyone talk about during the Game of the Year stuff last year about how that game ends, I feel like I need to see that for myself. So
I've heard the DLC is pretty good too. So maybe I should download that and check out that DLC at some point.
Yeah.
Because one of the DLCs you can play as the dog. Although you haven't met the dog, but there's a robo.
I haven't met the dog, so I don't know. But I like dogs. I would love to play as a dog. Dogs are cool.
Yeah, and you have to fight that dog, but then you get to be that dog. So.
Oh, I don't want to fight dogs. I want to be dogs. I want to be friends with dogs. Is there like a dog friendship part of that game? Can I just be best friends with the dog?
Yeah, but it's like one of those friendships that is forged after like a really intense sword battle.
All right. Okay. That's a lasting friendship, and I'm okay with that. I'm good with lasting dog friendship.
Mm-hmm. If people have any questions, drop them in the chat as we wind down to the other side of this show. Wasn't a whole lot of news over the weekend.
There rarely is.
The one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, I'm not sure there's much to say about it though, is that in Europe at least, the European Commission has declared they investigated the idea of free-to-play games with in-app purchases, and they've gotten complaints from consumers that, hey, these games aren't free, but they're labeled as free because to do anything meaningful in them requires a purchase. So over in Europe, that was investigated, and they asked Apple and Google, the holders of the most accessible marketplaces for these types of games, especially on mobile platforms, and Apple has, their response was, we're looking into it, but they have a new feature coming in iOS 8 this fall in which a phone or an account can be flagged as a child's account in order for a purchase to be approved. Like, that approval is sent to another device, and then that parent can say, yes, it's okay for you to spend 99 cents on this power-up in Candy Crush Saga or something like that, and they think Apple thinks that's good enough for how they're addressing this, whereas Google is going a step forward again, just in Europe, but hopefully it is everywhere else, in which those games will no longer be labeled as free if they have in-app purchases, because that's not truly free.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the right way to go for all of this. I mean, yes, you can play these games for free, but a lot of them are tuned in such a way to which that is a far more uncomfortable and unpleasant way to play them. So, yeah, I think that is something that should be investigated. I think that is something that should be maybe even some of the U.S. market should look at doing. We'll see. I doubt they will anytime soon, because that, in no way would actually benefit the companies that are releasing those games or hosting them. But yeah, I mean, that's always been a weird line. There are games that call themselves free to play where it's like you can barely play them without actually paying for some of that stuff. And I've always thought that whole thing was kind of gross. And after reading that thing with the Atari guy last week where he was talking about how the next step beyond games is gambling, it's like, it makes you realize there are a lot of people out there who just it just makes me uncomfortable the way some people look at games and how they want to present them to the public.
Well, it's it makes me think about the previous conversation we had about esports, where it's like free to play is a disingenuous term up front. It may a lot of these games may meet a technical definition that you can play these games for free. They are not going to be very fun, and you're not going to be able to do very much if you treat them that way. So, I think, in its most idealistic form, free to play, right? So to bring it full circle, Dota. Fantastic free to play game. It is a game that is free to play. Everything in the game is free. You are on the same level as everyone else when you download that game client. The only thing that you pay for is stuff on top of that. It's aesthetic, it's voice announcements packs, it's dumb bullshit to me as someone that doesn't play the game. But that's the way it should be. Like, the game should be an even playing ground for everyone, and then it should be stuff on top of that where you're already hooked into the game and its ecosystem, and then you want, not every game can just do the skin thing that Valve has done for Team Fortress 2 and has done for Dota, but I think when you hear the term free to play, it should mean Dota. It shouldn't mean Candy Crush Saga.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Hopefully that spreads, because I think that is meaningful consumer protection.
Yeah.
That these app store holders could hold companies' feet a little closer to the fire on, and hopefully it happens in Europe. Then I don't see any reason why it shouldn't happen over here, so hopefully we'll see that.
I can think of lots of reasons why it won't happen over here, but there's no reason why it shouldn't happen over here.
You're right. A lot of people asking about this Yogscast. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yogscast, yeah.
Yogscast Kickstarter that has gone through all sorts of turmoil.
Yeah.
They raised a bunch of money, and then the Kickstarter went awry because they were trying to bite off way more than they can chew, because they're trying to make a sort of a Minecraft-esque game in the Yogscast universe based on those personalities that run the extremely popular YouTube channel. That Kickstarter, it basically crashed and burned as much as one can crash and burn, and then they are offering a Steam code for some other sort of Minecrafty game for people as an apology. I think a lot of the reason it's rubbing the people the wrong way is not just that it's a example of a Kickstarter sort of completely flaming out, but it's coming at the same time that Yogscast announced they were doing an initiative where they partner with game creators and do a series of video based on that game, and then have a revenue share for a specific amount of time. So I think the reason people are sort of bothered is this idea that people spent a lot of money on this thing Yogscast endorsed at the same time that they are making more money from a partnership with game developers that raises all sorts of questions about the role of the media in 2014, who Yogscast are in that spectrum, And then, of course, tied into all of that is, people's feeling on Kickstarters and what happens when they go wrong.
Yeah, I had not heard of this podcast before. I am told it is quite popular. I had not heard about this game or anything involved with it before the story kind of came out. And reading over it, especially the stuff that's come out since the initial story, like the developer posting the blow by blow of where the money was spent. The story of the artist who they brought on for 2 weeks gave something like 35 grand to, and then they got a job at LucasArts, and nowhere in their contract with the Yogscast people was there a situation where they would have to ever give that money back, even if they did no work on the project.
Right.
So you get the impression that the people at Wintercule Games, which was the studio that was, I guess, making this, maybe didn't have the requisite experience necessary to make this project that they were talking about. From reading over the initial pitch for that game and seeing kind of what was actually presented there versus what ended up happening, I feel like people who looked carefully at it would have been able to pretty clearly see that this did not have the infrastructure necessary to make what they were claiming that game was going to be. Which isn't to say that maybe some miracle couldn't have happened and they couldn't have pulled it off, but it didn't look good from the get-go, it seems. And the fact that it has flamed out in this way, if nothing else, serves to just serve as an extremely cautionary reminder that you need to take a real close look at who it is that is making the games that you are looking to crowdfund. For all the shit that major studios get when they get involved in the crowdfunding thing, I feel like when you're looking at a studio like, say, a Double Fine or Harmonix or whoever else, if nothing else, even if that does end up crashing and burning somehow, you can at least look at the infrastructure of what those people have made before and go, well, this seems like perhaps a safer bet. A lot of these crowdfund games, you don't know what you're necessarily going to get unless they are really explicit and really detailed in what the game budgets are going to be and break down exactly how they're going to put it all together. And a lot of Kickstarters don't do that. And I think I kind of... I can't sit here and make fun of that, people for backing that whole thing, because you know what? There are lots of bad Kickstarters or weird-looking Kickstarters that get backed, and a lot of them, there have been a number of Kickstarter games that have defied the odds and still made it out. This whole thing just seems so crazy to me, though, that they made double the money that they were asking for with so little actual information on how they were going to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and read something like the last Kickstarter updates, they hadn't found a main programmer to do a lot of the heavy lifting for a lot of what that game was going to be. They weren't making a 2D side scroller. They were making a big open-ended 3D world in a Minecraft vein, because Yogscast started as a Minecraft YouTube channel. It's now much, much bigger than that, and they cover all sorts of things. But it started connected to Minecraft, so not a big surprise that that's something they try and partner with someone to create. And I think part of the reason people are pretty upset, and I think rightfully so, is the tonal distance between the explanation coming from Yogscast, which is mostly like, hey, we don't owe you anything, those guys really screwed it up, here's a Steam code, goodbye, as opposed to the developer who, yes, they screwed up. Yes, it seems like they squandered a bunch of money and potential, and they weren't really prepared for a project like this. But the way they talk about it, at least they're patently honest now. They could have been more honest in the last year when they weren't getting updates about the game. But at least now they are nakedly honest about the failures of running this project and where they screwed up and where they didn't allocate the money. Them even sharing that story about the $35,000 going to that then LucasArts employee, that shows a colossal failure in business management of a project, no matter the scope. And at least when they're talking about this in a sort of post-mortem way, you look at that and go, gosh, well, at least you know why it went wrong. It's very clear where they screwed up along the way, and in some way they seem to be taking ownership of that by just trying to explain to people how they did it wrong. And then, in the grand scheme of things, you hope that people take lessons from that, either to be more careful about how they allocate their money on Kickstarter, or for developers to be more careful about how they approach scaling projects and managing them. But I think it's with this Yogscast being like, I don't know, they screwed it up, and distancing themselves in a way that is disingenuous to how they associated themselves with it up front, which was very front and center, very much like, this is a Yogscast-based game, we're into this, we're excited, you should put your money to this, in a way that makes you feel like they had also done their due diligence when it's very clear that they had not. And so I don't blame people for being pretty pissed about that, because a bunch of people gave their money to a project that has gone nowhere, and then these guys who are making a lot of money off of this fandom, are distancing themselves in a way that I think should bother their fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And if nothing else, let this serve as a cautionary tale that where you put your money in crowdfunding needs to be carefully considered, and you need to know, or at least have some information out there to explain how you're going to go about making the thing you're going to make. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a whole lot more situations like this, because, again, I've seen plenty of Kickstarters that talk a good game without ever actually explaining how they're going to go about making what it is they're going to make. And I feel like this is far from the last example of this particular situation we're going to see.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as much as I feel bad for Yogscast fans that aren't getting the game that they were excited about, there are lots of good things that come out of failure, and it's having conversations like this, and people that back stuff, learning those lessons as well. So I don't root for failure, but when failure does occur, the postmortems of that can be pretty useful to take.
Yeah.
Going forward. So yeah, that's a bad situation all around for sure.
Totally.
What are you up to this week?
Let's see. So we recorded a quick look for Ollie Ollie, which is coming out on PC tomorrow. It is one of my favorite games of the year on the Vita, so you'll be able to finally have a video up for that tomorrow when the embargo lifts. I'm going to play Walking Dead Episode 4 and get a recap of that up on the site. I'm going to try and finally finish fucking Wolf Among Us review, which has been sitting mostly finished on my computer for about a week, because I'm horrible at managing my own time, apparently. So I'll have that. Vinny and I will have a couple more videos this week, I'm sure, just based on stuff that's coming out this week. Beyond that, nothing too specific. What do you got coming up?
Well, worth reading. We'll go live not too long after we click stop on this show. Tomorrow I discovered the main programmer for Shovel Knight is in Chicago. So
oh, no shit.
We are going to meet up for lunch and do sort of a post-mortem interview about that game. I'm trying to... I really like doing... I do interviews with developers sometimes before a game comes out, but those are my least favorite type of interview, because you're so misinformed about the game because you haven't had a chance to really dig into it in a meaningful way most of the time. And whereas post-mortem interviews, like, I've beaten the game, sometimes I reviewed the game, and I have a really firm grasp on what I would like to talk about with someone. So I'm meeting with that guy this week, and then I don't know if that'll go up on the site this week, but sometime in the near future. I also discovered the guy who, I don't know his name, unfortunately, it's not on the tip of my tongue, but who he recently, over the weekend, broke the Ocarina of Time speedrunning record, and he is also in Chicago. So I'm doing a little more digging into folks that are in Chicago, so I can kind of do some more in-person stuff. And I'm also going to be buying a camera today, and I'd like to start doing some video features with a friend. So we'll see how that stuff pans out. Because I want to go to Galloping Ghost, which is the arcade south of Chicago that has the Primal Rage 2 machine, and it seems criminal not to go and actually film all of that. So I'm going to try and get in to do some of that stuff on my own in the coming weeks and months. So yeah, I'm going to be exploring some of that stuff this week, and we'll see where that goes.
Cool.
But that is going to do it for the morning show. Alex, I will see you on Friday. I will see you on Friday. I will see you.
I will also
on Friday.
See you on Friday. Ow.
Okay, bye. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.